In this video, I'm giving you the top 3 pros and cons of the AquaNeat dual sponge filter. So let's go ahead and dive in. What is going on, everybody, and welcome. I am Kendall Water from Otter Creek Aquatics, and if you're looking to grow your aquarium keeping skills or looking for other videos pertaining to the aquarium hobby, then make sure you go ahead and consider subscribing so you don't miss any of my upcoming weekly videos. So let's go ahead and dive into those pros and cons. So I'm going to start out with the cons first, just to get the negativity out of the way. So for con number 1, we simply cannot hide the fact that this sponge filter is an absolute eyesore in any aquarium. No matter where you put it in the aquarium, you're most likely going to be able to see it. But we can take some steps to be able to hide that sponge filter so you can't see it as well. And those include putting live plants in front of the sponge filter, or putting some driftwood or some other decor, and this is going to be able to hide that sponge filter a little bit just so we can't see it as well. For con number 2, we're looking at one of the biggest downfalls that we have in the aquarium hobby, and that is the suction cups. So we use suction cups as hobbyists on a lot of things in our aquariums. And even though I really haven't had much trouble with these, I've had a couple where they popped off after I went to put them on, but after scraping the glass and getting that algae off and suction cupping it back, I've had no trouble ever since. I'm putting this in the con section because I don't want you guys to come back to me and say, these are absolute garbage. I cannot believe you recommended them. Even though I've never had trouble with them other than a couple times, doesn't mean that you're not going to have trouble with them. So, as hobbyists, I would love to see suction cups get better in this hobby. So for con number 2, we're talking about the suction cups. So con number 3 is kind of a personal problem that I have found with this filter, and it's due to my OCD, or obsessive compulsive disorder. If things aren't perfectly the way I want them, then it ain't gonna fly. I'm gonna keep redoing it until things are absolutely perfect. And this is one of the biggest downfalls that I have found with this filter. It may not be a big deal for you all, but it was for me. And that is when you're hooking up the airline hosing. Another thing that's cool is these things twist up and down, so you can actually move it around. But when you're hooking up the airline hosing, you can see where it hooks up. And the reason that this takes airline hosing is because it is an air-driven filter. So you hook it up to an air pump, and then it pulls water through the sponges, and then it pushes it back out. So when you go to hook this up, you hook it up right here on this thing, but to get the airline hosing lined up, you actually have to put it through this little hole, and that lines it up perfectly and puts it right on there. I've seen people in a lot of videos, they just put it to the side, probably because they've had the same issue, but me being OCD, I cannot do that. So it takes quite a while to actually get that airline hosing to go down through that little hole. And you can actually pull this off like this, pull the suction cup off, and it's a lot easier to play with. So I'm not going to do it for you guys because I don't want this to be a 45-minute video, but that is the biggest downfall that I have found with this filter, and it's probably just a personal preference. So if you guys are OCD, then you may want to definitely consider this, but if you're not, then this should be no problem for you. That's your biggest downfall? What about the time the super red bristle nose almost got stuck in this sponge filter? Keep an eye on your livestock. So now that we've finished with the cons, let's go ahead and dive into the pros. So for pros number 1, you have more space in your aquarium. And because of this, you're going to be able to put more plants, more decor, possibly even more fish. And the reason that this gives you more space is because you actually use the suction cups to suction cup it onto the side of the aquarium. Whereas the other sponge filters, they're just sitting at the bottom in the tank, and if you have a small 10 gallon or a 5 gallon, it's going to take a lot of that space up, and you're not going to be able to put much plants or decor in that tank. So for pros number 2, this is probably the most important and best thing about this sponge filter. So because it is the dual sponge, you're going to be able to cycle new aquariums and even change your sponges out without losing so much beneficial bacteria. Because if you've ever used sponge filters, you know that the sponges often get clogged up, and then you have to completely change out that sponge. And what's good about these is that if it gets clogged up or it starts getting way too dirty where you need to clean them, then literally you can just take one sponge and replace it with a new one, and that's going to leave all the beneficial bacteria on this sponge until maybe a week or two later, when you can change that one out as well, and this one had already gained that beneficial bacteria back. When you go to set up a new aquarium, you're going to do the same exact thing. You have one sponge filter, and say you buy another one, you can literally take one of these sponges and put it on that new sponge filter in your new tank, and that's going to go ahead and start your cycle. That way you can literally add fish the very same day if you add a small portion of fish. And then you're going to take one of the new sponges from the new sponge filter and replace it on this one. This is a huge benefit for these sponge filters, whereas the sponge filters that just sit on the bottom of the tank, if you have to go to replace them, you're going to have to replace that entire sponge, and you're going to lose a huge colony of beneficial bacteria. Unless you have sponge filters already seeding in different aquariums, but in that case you often have multiple sponge filters in other aquariums so you can get them seeding and growing that beneficial bacteria, and that's going to just take up way too much room. So that goes back to pros number 1, where this takes up less room and it's just greatly beneficial for that. So that is my number 2 pro, and probably the best thing about this dual sponge filter. For pro number 3, it's that you can run multiple dual sponge filters off of a single aquarium pump. As you can see right here on this breeding rack, I'm running 3 Tetra Whisper 100 air pumps, and I'm running them all on 12 sponge filters. This is really efficient and cost effective when you're going to be setting up a fish room or a rack with multiple tanks on it. This is going to get you by for cheap, and it's going to be able to get the job done at the same time. So for pro number 3, it's that you can run multiple sponge filters off of a single aquarium pump. I could run this entire rack off of one air pump if I had the right size. So think about that when you're going to be setting up multiple tanks. So for those of you that stuck around to the end of the video, I wanted to share one more pro with you, and we just touched on it. It is that it is cost effective and efficient at the same time. So you can get 4 of these small sponge filters, which are rated up to a 10-gallon tank, for like $15, or you can get an 8-pack for $25. This is really cheap when it comes to sponge filters, and you can even go up a size, which I think it's $35 for the large 8-pack. So I put an affiliate link down in the description, so if you plan on getting some new sponge filters for the fish room, or you're planning on setting up a rack, then go ahead and hit that link, and that'll take you straight to where you can buy these sponge filters. So let me know down in the comments what your all's preferred method is for tank filtration. If you got some value out of this video, go ahead and hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and ding that notification bell. That way you can keep up to date on our weekly videos. Keep following your dreams, keep inspiring, and until next time everybody, see ya.